Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hesed Sabbath Fellowship. Please call first 612-315-6778. We're shopping for a new building. What we do is the philosophy of eschatology, what you need to know, your reality, our existence. We do the story behind the story. It's not just the news. There's some great people out there, including John Haller, that do the news. I mean, he's willing to give you an hour and a half of his life just in delivering the news, let alone researching it, which could take 80 hours. We're Beth Hesed Sabbath Fellowship, and we'd love to talk to you today about the life in the blood. What's happening and what's going on. If the life is in the blood and what's happening with the jab, so to speak, is changing the life in the blood, what does that mean? And is it based on climate change? I doubt it. And we're watching Israel because they have the highest vaccination rate out there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens as a result. If there's any issues, that would lead us to believe that would be a perfect example of looking at what the possibilities will be for other people over time. And then there are many vaccine scientists that are saying we need to halt the jabs right now. So it's just interesting. We're going to look at it from a different angle. We're going to look at things from the life is in the blood, and we're modifying the life in the blood. So what does that mean? We're doing the philosophy of eschatology. It's interesting. I've given blood many, many times over the years. So has my father. I have a rare blood type that's a universal donor, and so I'm very valuable. Um, Only in my blood, not in any other way. I try not to twist the Bible. I try to give you the real prophecy, and I try to, give you the news as much as it's possible. So let's get back to the basics here, and this includes the foreigner. So when you're dealing with eating animals, you are not supposed to eat the blood because the life is there. So this is Leviticus 17, and I'll show you that in the Old Testament and the New. When someone from the community of Israel or one of the foreigners living with you eats any kind of blood, I will set myself against that person who eats the blood and cut off from his people. For the life of the creature is in the blood. I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for yourselves, for it is the blood that makes atonement because of the life. This is why I told the people of Israel, none of you is to eat blood, nor is any foreigner living with you to eat blood. For the life of every creature, its blood is its life. Therefore I said to the people of Israel, you are not to eat the blood of any creature, because of the life of every creature is its blood. Whoever eats of it will be cut off. Wow, including the foreigner. So you're saying, well, that's Old Testament. Well, if you're part of Israel, if you're grafted in, so to speak, then you're that foreigner. So that's Leviticus 17, 10 through 12 and 14. Okay, so let's look at Genesis. It looks like Noah had that same covenant. Only the flesh of its life, which is its blood, you are not to eat. I will certainly demand an accounting, that's Pakod, which is a numbered type of an accounting for the blood of your lives. And that's pre-Torah. Then Leviticus 1:5, he is to slaughter the young bull before Adonai, and the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, are to present the blood. They are to splash the blood against the sides of the altar, which is by the entrance to the tent of the meeting. The blood has a meaning, people, and they were splashing it. And you can claim, well, that's pre-Yeshua. Well, Yeshua was slain before the foundation of the world, which is Revelation 13:8. So there you go. So then Matthew 10 talks about the community aspect of this, that when you come to a town or a village, look for someone trustworthy to stay with, and stay with him until you leave. When you enter someone's household, say Shalom Aleichem. If the house deserves it, let your shalom rest on it. If not, your shalom shall return to you. Why? Because they have to keep the minimum. If they won't keep the Acts 15 and Acts 21 minimum, you can't give them a Shalom Aleichem and have it rest on them. For it seemed good to the Ruach HaKodesh, that's the Holy Spirit, and to us not to lay any heavier burden on you other than the following requirements: to abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, from the blood, from strangled, and from fornication. If you keep yourselves from these, you are doing the right thing and you're part of the community. However, in regard to the Goyim, the Gentiles, who have come to trust in Yeshua, we are all joined in writing with a letter with our decision that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, from blood, and what is strangled, and from fornication. So that's Acts 15 and Acts 21. James is running this court. Paul is in agreement with this, and you should be too, that you should keep the big four. You could claim they're four of the Noahide laws, and they are in many ways. And so these are minimums to be in community with other Messianic believers. Moses said, "This is the blood of the covenant which God has ordained for you." Likewise, he sprinkled the blood from both the tent and all the things used in its ceremonies. In fact, according to the Torah, almost everything is purified with the blood. Indeed, without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. So that's Acts 15, Acts 21, and Hebrews 9. All New Testament, all related to the Old Testament, which is the blood is important, and that the shedding of blood purifies, and that you should not be eating the blood. That is the life. So, Stern argues that this way, certain New Testament chapters are uniquely important for Messianic Jews because they bear directly on the central issue of Messianic Judaism, which is, what does it mean to be at the same time both Jewish and a believer in Yeshua, and how does one go about doing justice to both? This is one of those chapters, so that's Acts 15, and then Acts 21, and then Romans 7, 9 through 11, and Galatians and Ephesians, and then that would be Messianic Jews. That's Hebrews 7 through 10, and then James 2. So Stern is arguing that we want to be in community, but Gentiles have to keep the minimum. So what is that? So let's go through why this is so interesting, that life is in the blood. So first we're going to deal with epigenetics. And so this is a fear of a smell can be passed down several generations. So we have two mice. We teach them to smell a smell, say a rose petal or whatever the smell is, and then we electric shock them. And then we genetically pass their material along. They never meet their parents to the third and fourth generation, and you'll find that they make a brain change of some sort, and this passes along. These mice that have never met their parents, they've been artificially inseminated, they are frightened of that particular smell. I remember it was rose petals in one case. This seems to be a different smell, but so they've done these tests and proven it to be the case. Epigenetics, that means it's minor genetic changes. It's not changing your whole strand of DNA, just flipping a switch here and there, okay? And that's the difference going on right now. So we have to realize that life is in the blood, but little minor changes can be made. I argue with the case of covert narcissism, that a little switch has been flipped when they're about 2 years of age because they aren't loved, and then it passes along throughout their whole life, and they just ruin relationships and ruin people and have affairs and lie, and it's an epigenetic change. Okay, this one's interesting. This is 14 generations. So this means that they have seen now, observed epigenetic memories being passed down for 14 generations in sea animals. Very interesting. And so we assumed that there was only 3 and 4 generations, but now they've found it to be 14. Now, the other intriguing thing is with Holocaust survivors, they see that they have lower levels of the hormone cortisol, which helps your body bounce back after trauma, because they went through this Holocaust and it was so horrible. So these changes are epigenetic. I mean, they're still human beings, or they're still plant life, or animal life in the ocean, but they make epigenetic changes. Okay. Now this is going to get weird because we're going to go through a few transplants, and it looks like you have a transplant and something passes along from that. So this particular lady used to enjoy biographies and Da Vinci Code, things like that. And now she likes Jane Austen's Persuasion and Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, because somehow she had a kidney transplant and it just changed her. So this is from the Daily Mail. And so what else? What other life form is transplanted to the recipient? This one's bizarre. Okay, so Sonny Graham had heart issues. Okay, and there's Sonny Graham, 69 years of age, and his wife that he married, and her husband shot himself. So Mr. Cottle, her husband, shot himself when he was 33, and Mr. Graham got the heart, and that was back in 1995. And so Cottle shot himself in the head, and the heart was transplanted that day. And so Mr. Graham wanted to reach out to the family and say thank you for this, and he fell in love with this Mrs. Cottle, and she became Mrs. Graham. And so then 12 years later, There was no signs of depression. She seemed to be a nurse and a nice person. They're believers. He shot himself dead. He shot himself in the neck after 12 years of marriage. I argue it's because he picked up the heart from Mr. Cottle, and there's something about the life, possibly the death, that transferred through in this. We'll study it some more here. Okay, so this is Claire Sylvia. She was 47 and dying from a disease, and so she was given the organs of an 18-year-old boy who had been killed. He had been killed on a motorcycle accident, and this young man really loved beer and chicken fingers, and she started really liking beer and chicken fingers. And he was, an active kid, and she was not gay per se, but she started to like women because he liked women, so he loved beer and chicken fingers, and she suddenly loved that, and she had to know more about it, and she was getting dreams and visions about him. She knew his name and everything, and she started to walk differently, like a muscle-bound football player, and she was becoming more, she was a heterosexual her whole life, but she was starting to like women like this young man would have. And so it's just interesting. So she knew his name was Tim Layton because she had basically a vision of that, and then another person had a vision too. And so they found this Tim L, and it was true. And she met the 5 sisters and brothers, and it's just interesting how these things pass through. Here's another one. After bone marrow transplant, man's semen contains only donor's DNA. So the marrow is where it produces the life, which then in turn changes the DNA from one person's DNA to the other. So this man completely had his marrow replaced by another man's, and suddenly now he doesn't have his own DNA in his sperm. He has the other man's DNA. Yeah, so the life is in the blood. The life is made in the bone marrow, and that changes your sperm and your DNA in your sperm, which is bizarre. Okay, so now this is interesting. I just wanted to clip it and just show it to you. This man is really arguing that there's a heavenly pattern and there's the earthly pattern with the tabernacle, and there's a lot written about it, and that our DNA and also our blood seem to be like that heavenly pattern or the earthly pattern, as much as you can tell. And so he goes through and he kind of describes the similarities between the design aspects. And, he's comparing it back and forth. And if you want to stop and find this article, you can. But it's very interesting. He thinks that it's similar in terms of how God looked at the perfection of the heavens and said, I'll make human beings like that in terms of their DNA and their blood and things like that. So it's very interesting. And so comparing heaven with our vascular and DNA systems, very interesting, that we're a living temple. And so he's arguing that we are very similar to the living temple up in heaven. So, and with other aspects too. Very interesting. So anyway, fragments encased in water during dehydration. No, that was not the article that I wanted to say. Here it is. So this is the end of Ecclesiastes. Before the silver cord, I argue the DNA is snapped, and the bowl of gold is cracked, and the pitcher is shattered at the spring, and the pulley is broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. So that's Ecclesiastes 12, and it talks about death. So certain things in life resemble certain aspects of death when you go to heaven. And so it's just comparable. And he's making that case. So we'll see if he's accurate or not, but he thinks we're patterned after heaven. Okay, so what's the point? 2 options. 1, Yeshua gave his life for us, and by his life-giving blood, we have life. We have become his seed, which you saw how the blood basically changes the seed, okay, spreading faith throughout the world. This links his life with our seed, which could be a literal making babies or converts in faith to Yeshua. This reestablishes the axiom that Yeshua changes life, okay? And then point number 2. By science establishing that the marrow is where the blood is created, which is the life, and that the marrow transplant causes the sperm to match the new marrow, it proves that the Bible is correct. Again, our blood produces our seed, which is the spark of new life. This proves the scientific baseline. Only God can create life. We can move it from person to person via transplants, and we can kill it, but we can't create it. By noting the baseline scientific rules, that we can prove that a heart transplant may cause the recipient to favor tendencies from the donor, epigenetics, okay, and but not cause semen changes. We note that only a marrow transplant changes the seed. It proves God's rules of life. Okay, now why am I giving you all this backstory? Because I just watched this video. So this is called Dark Horse Podcast, and who knows how long they'll be on YouTube. But what I wanted to show you from this particular video is the Pfizer data reveals where do the lipid nanoparticles collect. So if the life is in the blood or possibly the ovaries here, you can see how everything changes over the fact of the jab, that you get basically the particles are supposed to collect in your arm and stay there, but they're collecting in the brain, the liver, the kidneys, the blood vessels, the ovaries, and the bone marrow, okay? And they're collecting mostly in the bone marrow and the ovaries. Well, that's reproductive life, and that's life, and for bone marrow, and then the whole blood, which is life. So basically, Dr. Robert Malone, who is an mRNA expert, and he really invented it. And then he's talking to Dr. Stephen Kirsch. He's saying there are long-term implications, reactivation of latent human retroviruses that could occur as a result of this. And also, it's modifying life, okay? And so we'll see what happens. We'll wait this thing out, all of these jab changes that are made to the body, and see what happens as a result of it. But they're questioning the science behind it right now. And then, so the Jews have an argument, and they're saying that if you eat the blood, you will murder more. And by them not eating the blood, they murder less. And that is statistically accurate. So they're saying the Torah has an abhorrence for consuming blood, and it may have led to the Jewish people abhorrence for shedding it. They're more passive. Yes, they are forced into war at times, but they're generally very passive within their society. There's a very low murder rate. Now, the Christians are going to argue that grace should be extended for differences that aren't central to the gospel, like eating blood. Well, that's not grace. We're not supposed to extend grace. And Peter and Paul and James all said, no, you don't extend grace for that. But the Jews understand, and this is unique, they drain the blood from the meat, they slaughter properly, and they use salting, and then it has a profound moral impact on its practitioners. They think it's not a coincidence that this abhorrence to consuming blood has led to a strong abhorrence to shedding it. Draining the blood is important, and so it raises the moral level of an entire person group. So where are we right now in terms of things? We are moving along through the birth pangs, and who knows? I argue the third seal is open. I argue that the seals are the birth pangs prior to this final 7 years, and so. If life is in the blood, how does that affect us? I think we're going to see martyrdom soon. The fourth seal is part of this, so let's show you seal 1, seal 2, seal 3 and their directions, and then seal 4, which is 4 different components. And I'm arguing that you're going to see death coming from 4 different components. And it could be from the vax, or from some kind of an illness. Part of it is from death. Part of it is from supernatural death, and then drought is part of it too, and you're noticing drought already. Or drought, we call it LEMO, which is just crop failure or drought or many combinations of things. Could be flooding, could be many different things. So all of this is testing us because we need to wear clean garments. We're coming up to a wedding shortly, so be blessed. That's the end of the video, and take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.